And so good evening and welcome to our second Mackellar Rising Town Hall. It's possibly the last time that we meet online, but we're just so thrilled. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've had a really fantastic turnout. First of all, I'd like to start, of course, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm standing on, the Gadigal people. Likewise, the traditional owners of the land wherever you may be this evening. And of course, we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Lisa Forrest, and as many of you know, I'm sort of a Mackellar old girl, if you like. I grew up I went to school in, I've been chatting away, so I'm not even sure whether we've started or not, so I'll start again if we haven't. Sorry about that. Very good evening. I might have been talking away and nobody was there, but I'm just saying, again, good evening. Welcome to our second Mackellar Rising Town Hall. It's possibly our last online event before we meet in person. We're just so thrilled at the number of people who've responded to our, what we think is a really important discussion on integrity this evening. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm standing on, the Gadigal people, and of course, the traditional owners of the land wherever you may be this evening. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Lisa Forrest. As many of you know, I grew up in, I went to school in, and I represented Australia from the electorate of Mackellar. I'm delighted to be part of Mackellar Rising and more broadly, part of this very exciting, growing grassroots movement that is coming together all around the country in a show of people power with the aim of bringing integrity, accountability and trust back into the political landscape. Only we can do it. It is up to us to demand it. And so tonight we're putting integrity front and centre, particularly how the people of Mackellar might be better represented by an independent, because right now we're feeling, a little bit taken for granted, perhaps a little bit insulted. Along with climate change and the economy, integrity is right up there as an issue for Mackellar voters. And yet last week, Mackellar's representative didn't support Zali Steggall's Climate Act bill. And along with other moderates in the LNP, voted to ignore their speaker's recommendation to refer Christian Porter and his secret slush fund to the Privileges Committee for investigation. That is the first time that has happened since Federation, so it's unprecedented. Now, back in March last year, the PM called hoarding toilet paper un-Australian, but it seems that it's not un-Australian to ignore time-honoured conventions like the Westminster system, where up until very recently, it was a minister's responsibility for a department suspected of corruption, rorting, incompetence in executing responsibilities, breaching ministerial codes of conduct. That minister was responsible and they stepped down while under investigation or they resigned. That was the norm until now, but it seems that it's not un-Australian for a minister to ignore their responsibilities. And too bad if you want to debate issues like this in Parliament, because the party of Robert Menzies, of liberalism, of the rights of the individual, of the champions of free speech, are now champion gaggers. Gagging, which if you don't know is where the leader of the House can shut down questions or debate or force bills to be ignored, was rarely used until this Parliament. Yet up until January 2021 in this Parliament, gagging has been used to shut down MPs 233 times and passed 18 divisions of legislation. So that means the government MPs, including those MPs who call themselves moderates, have voted more times to silence their political opponents than they have to make laws, by a factor of 13, which is just incredible. But I guess that's not un-Australian now to gag debate. And we haven't even mentioned the secrets, the abuse, the undermining of institutions that Australians trust, the lawful but no less distasteful unchecked influence of lobbyists and political donations, the treatment of whistleblowers, the lies in political advertising, it just goes on and on. Politicians want us to believe that it's always been this way, and certainly nobody is saying that the past was perfect. I wrote a book about the underhanded tactics used by Malcolm Fraser's government to try to stop us from going to Moscow, to the Moscow Games back in 1980. Even back then, the Nationals wanted to keep selling wool and wheat to the Soviet Union while accusing us of lacking integrity for wanting to go to the Olympic Games. But Australians, it's never been this bad. And Australians can only be pushed so far. And that is why the overwhelming majority of us, no matter who we vote for, want a federal ICAC with teeth that will hold politicians of all persuasions to account. Those politicians who want to game the system, we want them held to account. Unfortunately, we learned also last week in an op-ed for The Australian that the Mackellar representative doesn't support a federal ICAC. So it's curious to me that if we question extra surveillance and curtailing of our freedoms in the name of terrorism or security, politicians say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you don't have anything to worry about. So likewise, I guess, for a federal ICAC, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you don't have anything to worry about by a federal ICAC. So why oppose it? Every business has a board of directors that ensures good governance. So that's all we Australians are asking for, which of course leads me to introduce our panel, 3 individuals of impeccable integrity. Joining us from Parliament House during the final week of sitting. We're very lucky to have her. She could have to dash off at any moment to go and vote in the House, but of course Helen Haines has made integrity the cornerstone of her time in Parliament. She's doing her best to introduce an integrity bill into Parliament, and we're going to find out exactly how far Helen Haines, the independent MP for Indi, has got with that. We're also going to talk to the former Associate Professor at the Crawford School of Public Policy at the ANU in Canberra, currently Chief Economist at the Australian Institute, Richard Dennis, and a man who has held a hose for some 50 years, Greg Mullins, earned himself the status of living legend in Australia when he led that group of 25 fire chiefs, trying without success to warn the Prime Minister and climate deniers in the LNP of what was coming back in our black summer of 2019-2020. But trying to tell the truth to those with a lot to hide comes at a cost, and we'll chat to Greg about that. So please, make welcome from wherever you are tonight, Richard Dennis, Helen Haines and Greg Mullins. And so just imagine all 3 of you, if you like, that you are being applauded out there. Helen, we'll go straight to you because I know that you might have to dash anytime, off any time. So tell us a little bit, just bring us up to date, up to speed with where you are with the with your integrity bill.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And good evening to everyone. I can see there's 88 people on the line plus our panel tonight. I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country. As Lisa said, I'm in the Parliament, living on the knife edge. Bells can always ring at any time. But I'm absolutely delighted to join you tonight. And I'm just so proud and privileged to be the member for Indi and follow in the footsteps of the first independent member for Indi, Cathy McGowan, and to represent what is an incredible movement, grassroots movement in regional Australia. And only last night about this time I was meeting virtually with a whole bunch of my volunteers, and there's 1,700 of them signed up to the values of Indi and getting ready for the next federal election. And we very, very much hope that we can keep Indi independent. So hats off to all of you for engaging with your democracy, for getting active, for having the conversations, and for realising that your seat is yours to give. It's not for someone to take. And I think that once you realise that, then you can actually say to your MP, whoever that may be, whether it be an independent or a party member, these are the issues that matter to us. These are the issues that we want our voices heard in the Parliament. So one of the key things for Indi is integrity. It's fundamental, we think, to a highly functioning democracy. It's absolutely synergistic with strong action on climate change. It's key to having public policy that is truly being developed for the people. And it's why it's something I have great confidence in championing for the people of Indi as their representative in the House. And in fact, people ask me, Helen, with the COVID pandemic going on, with the Black Summer bushfires that you had prior to COVID in your electorate, does it still matter to the people for Indi? And I love to just tell the little story about in the worst moments of the Black Summer bushfires in the Upper Murray. I was in the Corryong basketball stadium, and I was talking to people who'd been evacuated. The smoke was acrid. We could barely see each other. And there were volunteers everywhere doing their great work. And I sat down with an elderly couple, and they were dairy farmers, and they had been evacuated from their farm. And I was cleaning this elderly lady's glasses as I was talking to her, and I handed them back to her, and she said, Helen, whatever you do, no matter what happens, make sure you don't let the government off the hook on integrity. And I've never forgotten it, and I've never forgotten her, and it gives me enormous courage when I stand up in the House to say things that are at times unpopular. members of Parliament, things like why we must have public hearings when it's in the public interest to do so, why an integrity commission must be retrospective, why we need a broad definition of corruption, why referrals need to be able to come from anyone, and why we need strong whistleblower protection. So those things are fundamental to an integrity commission, and they are fundamental to the people that I represent.
And have you been gagged in any times that you tried to speak up there and introduce anything?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And in fact, it was quite funny when I was first gagged, because I don't know what it is about me. Maybe it's because I used to be a matron of a hospital, or maybe it was because I'm a lapsed Catholic shaped by the hands of the Sisters of Charity. But quite a few people got the giggles when I got gagged. They said, "Oh, Eva, I've been Dr Helen Haines." Can I say that this kind of whole gag thing, this was a total surprise to me. Like, I arrived in the Parliament with absolutely no political credentials at all, and pretty much everything was a surprise to me. Yeah. But sometimes these gag motions are really, really serious, because they're shutting down debate on something as important as the EPBC Act, the Environmental Protection Act, whereby many of us didn't get to speak because it was slammed through the lower house really quickly. Sometimes they're gag motions on what can be, at times, rather outrageous motions from the opposition. And of course, the government doesn't want that to be, debated. So there's multiple reasons why the Leader of the House might say, no, thank you, we're not going to have any more to be said about that. But Lisa's point that there's been more gag motions in this Parliament than any other is actually really astounding.
Incredible. So can I just back up from, that, from your bill?
About it is one of the criticisms I get from people Sorry, Lisa, I just had a bit of time delay. What was your question?
Oh, good. I was just going to say, just to back up from the bill, if you like, why is integrity important to you? I wonder if, sometimes it's like sportsmanship. I was sort of brought up on this idea that, you represented, the people who supported you with integrity to make them proud, magnanimous in victory and defeat. But then I sort of think, God, in this real world, in the political world you're in, is, integrity, sportsmanship, is it just sort of a bit of a naive expectation?
No, you're absolutely spot on. And I think the analogy with sportsmanship is bang on. There's only 151 seats in the House of Representatives. To represent your electorate is an extraordinary honour. To then come into a role as a minister in the government is an even greater honour. Of course it is. And I think it's not unreasonable in any way to hold oneself to account at a level that is beyond reproach. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that people can't make honest mistakes. Of course they can. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is a fundamental code of conduct. And again, one of the great surprises to me when I came here is that there is no code of conduct for a parliamentarian. There just isn't one. And I mean, can you imagine in any other professional group that there's not some overarching code of conduct? And one of the key things in my bill is to establish such a thing. It has a sister bill, which would establish it's called the Commonwealth Parliamentary Standards Bill. So we haven't even got that. So that's really fundamental. We know that our ministers have a code of conduct, but that's put together by the Prime Minister, and it's at the Prime Minister's pleasure as to whether that's actually applied. And I think Lisa gave some pretty powerful examples which would indicate that it's not applied in a way that would meet public expectations. So we've got a lot of work to do around culture. We've got a lot of work to do around transparency. And I think it's fundamental to every other piece of policy that should ever flow out of this place, that we have that bedrock of a culture with high standards of behaviour and an independent integrity commission that can hold us all to account.
Helen, you might be able to stay with us, and we hope you can, but just in case, I thought I'd ask one question. We've got a terrific Year 11 student who's always with us in our town halls, and Will Castle, asks, given the ease with which the government appears to pork barrel communities to win votes, how can independents counter this corruption and offer a viable alternative without paying voters off?
Was that Will, did you say?
Yeah, Will Castle in year 11. Will's into politics.
Yeah,
might end up in your office one day helping you.
Fantastic. I have lots of young people who come and volunteer in my office. I love having them, but sometimes they write speeches for me and I get them doing lots of research for me. So Will, when you're 18, please get in touch. Really delighted that you're participating in such a powerful way in your democracy. This is what we must have. We need to be paying attention, and clearly you are. Look, one of the things that I do as an independent is work really closely with my community, and I advocate and I lobby ministers for projects that we see as really valuable to our prosperity and often to our safety. Things like safer roads, things like better hospital services, things like grants to small clubs, various things. I just came from a meeting just before this Zoom with Minister Hunt, where I was talking to him about all the reasons why he really needs to get and fund a new hospital in Wodonga. So there's really legitimate ways that you can put forward proposals for various grants and infrastructure projects in your community. And as an independent, I reckon I'm pretty good at it because I know my community very well and I bring them along with me. We advocate together. Pork barrelling, the fact that people laugh when even that term is used, that really fills me with despair because it's just not funny. It's not okay. It is not part of the Westminster system. And you'll hear ministers say that ministers have discretion under the Westminster system to ultimately decide on grant funding. Well, yes, they do. But that doesn't give them discretion to exercise undue influence or conflicts during an election period. That's where an integrity commission comes in. If there has been some conflict or influence. So I would love to see that whole term pork barrelling is completely abandoned and we talk about maladministration, which I think is more accurate.
Right.
As an independent, one of the lovely things about being an independent is I can call things out as I see it or as my community tells me to. I don't have to be an apologist to my party. Every day when I get out of bed, I know who I work for. And every time I put out a press statement, I don't need to seek permission from the leader of my party. And that gives me a great capacity to tell it as I see it.
Yeah, I think that's mentioned in the Craig Rucastle and Christian Van Buren's documentary, Big Deal. The normalising of things like pork barrelling is just so, that's what's so incredible about it. It's just become normal as opposed to something that's maladministration, as you say. But I'll move on to Richard Dennis and, of course, Greg Mullins, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to you, Helen. If we can't and you have to run off, thank you so much. It's been terrific to have you with us. Richard Dennis, you've watched politics for a long time. Have you ever seen it like this?
No. Look, it is a new low. I said, I was talking to someone the other day, I said, how many times can you sort of say we've hit a new low before you admit that we're in a new paradigm? And at the moment, we're in a new paradigm where, as Helen just said, ministers are entirely unashamed to admit that they use public money to just, with colour-coded spreadsheets, help them win elections with no pretense that they're making decisions in the national interest. So to be clear, from my point of view, democracy thrives on high expectations. And if we want to have not just integrity in government, if we want to have a healthy, wealthy, prosperous community, then we need the people who we elect to make decisions on our behalf to do so with integrity. Integrity isn't just a standalone issue. Integrity influences everything. We will not be able to implement good economic policies if the people in charge are purely thinking about which seat do I need to win at the next election. We will not be able to implement good health policies or good education policies if the people we entrust to spend tens of billions of our dollars are spending more time talking to their junior staffers about colour-coded spreadsheets than they are thinking about what does the nation need and what are we going to do. So I do think we are at a new low. And again, I agree with everything Helen said. once upon a time, ministers would fall on their sword. They would resign, not because they'd been convicted of a crime, right? This is an entirely new idea, that until you have proven in court beyond reasonable doubt that a minister's committed a crime, that everything is tickety-boo. Once upon a time, ministers would resign if the department that they oversaw made a significant error. Ministers would resign if there was any hint of scandal or corruption, not because they were admitting guilt, but because they knew the position of trust they were in was so important that they would actually rather step back from ministerial responsibility than allow the public to lose faith in the role of government. So this idea, an entirely brand spanking new idea from Scott Morrison, that unless a minister has been convicted of a crime where a prosecutor has proved beyond reasonable doubt that something has occurred, then his mantra is everything's okay.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not enough to see here. And how dare you ask questions? How dare you insult this poor minister? So let's be clear, Bridget McKenzie was forced to step down for the sports rorts affair, but she was recently re-promoted. Someone in Angus Taylor's office, I don't know who, so I'm not defaming anyone here, but what we do know for a fact is that someone in Angus Taylor's office faked up a fraudulent document that was critical of the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, and gave it to a journalist.
Yeah.
We know this happened. We just never found out who in the office literally committed a fraud in order to do political harm to an opponent. We know that happened. But it would be very rude to say it was Angus, which I'm not saying it was, but once upon a time he would have stepped down in a heartbeat. Similarly, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Phil Gaetjens, was tasked with the task of finding out who knew what in the Prime Minister's office about the allegations of rape that took place in Parliament House, and Phil's yet to finish that report. So once upon a time, ministers put the Parliament and the public ahead of their own egos, which are enormous, I should say. But even still, the enormous egos of former ministers thought that the public's faith in the parliamentary system was more important than their determination to stay minister for something. And under this government, it's gone. It is completely gone. And unless you can get a prosecution in court, this Prime Minister thinks that any minister who hasn't been convicted of a crime, it's okay by him to, if you hide $1 million donation, commit a fraud, or cover up potentially illegal conduct.
So, Richard, can I just ask you then how to sort of be specific for our Mackellar constituents, many of whom are small business owners, like when it comes to the economy, because the economy is, very important, how does integrity and economics, if you like, work together, particularly, say, for small business people?
Oh, look, it's incredibly important in every way. So let's start at the beginning. This year, the Morrison government will spend around $500,000 million, our dollars. $500 billion is the annual spend. I reckon if you were in charge or overseeing the expenditure of $500,000 million a year, you would be quite comfortable with oversight and transparency. So for anyone in Mackellar that thinks that governments might be wasting money on things, then how could you not be concerned that 1,000 days after announcing he will introduce a corruption watchdog, he's yet to do so? We know from the National Audit Office that enormous amounts of money have been wasted on sports rorts. In terms of wasted, I mean given at high price to the electorates they care most about, not yours. We know that happened with sports rorts. We know that happened with regional grants. We've seen it again and again with this government, car parks. All right. So that expenditure of public money is not being used on infrastructure to improve the economy in your part of the world because it's a safe seat. So leaving aside the completely ignoring of, well, who in Australia does need these services and how are we deciding how to give them to, it's worse for the people of Mackellar. Not only are your taxes getting wasted on this nonsense, but you're not getting any of it. You're not because they think you're not a marginal seat. Yeah. Now, I would like it if governments would spend money where it's needed. I think that's the ideal. But, if you're a small business person in Mackellar, you're missing out two ways. Your tax dollars are getting wasted, and I promise it's not coming back to Mackellar because they're taking your vote for granted.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to you, of course, with questions from our audience that are just really pouring in. But I wanted to chat to Greg Mullins. I've just finished your book, Greg, Firestorm, terrific. Everyone should read it if they'd really like to, see beautifully detailed just the way that, climate has affected these fires and, of course, other natural disasters that you are been facing. I just wondered, during the Black Summer, a lot of politicians stood up and said, no, now is not the appropriate time to talk about climate change and their effect on these fires at the moment. I'm just wondered, in the last week or so, as the LNP have been, coming together and working their way through this net zero by 2050, has anyone called you in the past week or so? Has this been the appropriate time to talk about climate change and natural disasters in Australia?
No, they still haven't called, and maybe the time to speak about it is when we become extinct and the planet looks a bit like Venus. But look, what an incredibly frustrating time. You know the story, Lisa, and it's in my book, and I'm not trying to plug my book, everybody, because we knew, and we being at the time 23 former fire and emergency chiefs from every fire service in Australia, SES, Forestry, National Parks, there's now 35 of us. We knew that a horror bushfire season was coming. We tried to warn the Prime Minister from April. We wrote in April, in May, we emailed, we phoned, and in July we got a letter thanking us for congratulating him on his election win. By the way, I'm too busy to meet with you. The only time we actually were contacted was when questions were raised in Parliament and it was in the media, why won't you speak to the former fire chiefs? Because the current fire chiefs have got their hands pretty full and fighting fires, and they're not allowed, as I've said, I was gagged, if you like, when I was in the position of Commissioner of Fire and Rescue. So miraculously, on the day it was raised in Parliament, I received a phone call offering a meeting with Angus Taylor. We were played. We went to Parliament House and met with Angus Taylor and David Littleproud, and they were very nice. They were only going to give us 20 minutes. We were coming from Tasmania, Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, and 20 minutes they were going to give us. So it was just a tick in the box to say, we've spoken to the silly old fire chiefs and let's get on with it. The Prime Minister couldn't meet with us because he was on holidays in Hawaii, as we later found out. And look, I don't begrudge someone taking a holiday, but making it secret, keeping it secret from the public, and we didn't even know that Michael McCormack was acting Prime Minister.
Yeah,
that was a disgrace. We had a national disaster. Every state and territory was burning at that time. It was a national disaster. We had insufficient resources and missing in action. And I don't hold a hose, mate. And I don't want to get personal because that's what they did with us. So they went on the attack. Couldn't say anything about our expertise, so they just attacked us personally.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to integrity, doesn't it? Because if we're not actually listening to the experts in the field, and you have not only been dealing with fires and natural disasters in Australia, but you'd travelled around the world, you'd seen what was happening in America, in Spain, in other countries, the way they were fighting. Everybody was talking about the fact that the fires were getting hotter, they were creating their own climate, if you like, creating storms above them. And not only were you, once upon a time, not so long ago, in the 90s, you were fighting fires on sort of 30 to 40 degree days. Now you're fighting extraordinary fires on 40 to 50 degree days. And yet, no, the people who are making decisions for us are not paying attention to experts. In fact, they're undermining you.
Yeah, and look, so what was frustrating through there was the existing fire chiefs, the non-retired ones, had put a detailed business case to the government in 2018, and it's a Senate select inquiry into the Tasmanian fires of 2016 said more aircraft. They're all sourced from the Northern Hemisphere, and because our fire seasons are lengthening and theirs are, there's an overlap, and they won't allow them to go when we need them.
Yeah.
And the government just ignored that. They continue to ignore that. Now the Royal Commission's recommended it as well. But nothing to see here. Move on. Royal Commission, 80 recommendations. Prime Minister David Littleproud press conference. We support all of the recommendations. When the papers came out, it's actually only 14. The rest are somebody else's responsibility. States and territories actually joint 55 of them. Who should coordinate that? Well, I thought the federal government, but no, we'll just, and I know people who worked on the Royal Commission are incredibly frustrated. They actually said in the report, don't let this sit on the shelf like that 127 other bushfire inquiries through history, act on this one. But so it's, I can't describe to you what summer was like. I was out fighting fires throughout the state as a volunteer. I'm a member of Terry Hill's brigade. That's where I grew up, and Dad was a volunteer for 6 years and 39 years with fire and rescue. But I was fighting real fires and then having to come back and fight political fires. And I just thought facts and science would be accepted. But, you know, I've got to say it, the lies, it's arsonists. Well, the facts are, just talk to New South Wales Police, South Australian Police, Victorian Police. No, there was less arson. Most of the fires were started by lightning, the big fires. Oh, it's the Greens. Well, they're not in power. How do they make regulations and acts about hazard reduction? Three national parks. Well, good on you. New South Wales Liberal National Government, Mr Barilaro, who bagged national parks, you're the one who oversaw reducing their workforce while expanding the parks estate. So very, you know, and in the midst of it, it was just personal insults. We were time wasters. Mr Barilaro said we were bastards for raising climate change during fires. It's just astounding. I've been a public servant, you know, for 4 decades, and an apolitical public servant. Thank God I can actually say what I think now, because there's something, Richard said it, they talk about tipping points with climate. We've reached a tipping point with bushfires worldwide. They're different now. They're uncontrollable in the worst years because the weather is so much worse. We've reached a tipping point in politics. Truth doesn't matter anymore. It's just aggression, testosterone, and bullying, and that's what carries the day.
So how might having an independent in Mackellar make a difference? I mean, this is an electorate that is, you know, it comes to waterways, oceans, bushland, like, you know, right for bushfires, but for also natural disasters. We've got a huge wall down at Collaroy now. I mean, this is an area that's really, you know, will really be affected by climate change and by natural disasters.
Yeah, Lisa, what frightens me, so I know intimately, I'm running a hazard reduction burn at Davidson tomorrow. I'm a group officer in the RFS now. And we haven't had a major bushfire here since 1994. And the experience, the bushfire patterns are changing. They're more frequent in the Blue Mountains than they used to be. It's building up, building up, building up. We, you know, in years to come, when an El Nino comes, we could have a fire like we've never seen before. If we get catastrophic weather conditions, it's almost inevitable. I'm sorry, everyone, but we saw my karate dojo that I taught at and trained at for years nearly got washed away on Collaroy Beach with a, you know, few centimetres of rising seas. and it's going to get worse and worse. The cyclones are going to come further south. There won't be as many, but they'll be more severe. So we need somebody who won't vote according to the pager message and ideology of their party, which seems to matter more than the greater good and the public and our safety. We need someone who'll stick up for the local area and speak honestly about what the needs of the area are. Because I know from when I was a little kid, I was terrified my brother was going to be called up and sent to fight in Vietnam. And I remember my parents saying, I'll never forget it. They said, look, this is a blue ribbon Liberal seat and they're committed to this war, and doesn't matter what we do here, how we vote, we'll always have a Liberal here. And, you know, hopefully Terry won't get called up. I'll never forget that. That was just seared into my memory. And we need attention in Mackellar. We don't want big drill rigs off the coast ruining our beaches. And look, it's time for change. I'm certainly not voting Liberal.
We were voting independent, right? So that's what we're here for. So I'm going to just go to our audience, because Helen's still here, and you know, we'll might as well try and get as many questions as we possibly can. So I've got a few that are coming through already. Some were sent through earlier. So let's take this question from Eva. Much has been made in the press of the falling standards, we talked about it tonight too, of Australian democracy under this government. Yet one favoured answer by Liberals when asked to support, say, the climate change bill is that they won't because it's undemocratic. Apparently, Jason Polinsky and Tim Wilson both used this line. What is your take on this? Helen, Richard, I'm not sure who might like to answer that, but
maybe I'll jump in, Lisa. Yeah, this is a common line, that anyone who suggests that there be some kind of independent body that would have some say over policy direction is often criticised as they're not the elected members of the parliament. So that's a criticism that was made of Zali's bill, but of course there is parliamentary oversight. What Zali's bill would be doing would be to do what hasn't happened today, and that is to actually legislate for carbon emissions targets that would compel governments into the future to stick to the plan, essentially. Yep. But the actual plan, the how to do it, would remain in the hands of the government of the day. So, you know, by my mind, that's not undemocratic at all. So that is a common criticism. Maybe you have something to say about that, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous and it's cynical in the extreme. I mean, most people have probably heard of a little organisation called the Reserve Bank of Australia. It's a plucky little institution that determines how big your mortgage is. Or the interest rate you pay on that mortgage. The Parliament delegated interest rate setting powers to the Reserve Bank of Australia. Is that undemocratic? No. Is it central to the Liberal Party's perception of how best to manage the economy? Yes. So, I mean, there's dozens of examples, but none more obvious than the Reserve Bank. But another one slightly different, but not unrelated. I mean, the Parliament creates laws all the time and then asks judges to implement them. No one says that's anti-democratic. And can you imagine if we let the parliamentarians actually judge people? So often, whether it's a specific issue of judgment or whether it's a specific issue of economic management, we've created structures where the Parliament delegates decision-making to another person. And if Jason Polinsky doesn't know that, then he's a moron. And if he does know that, then he's a liar. Why is he coming up with fake reasons for doing something? Or does he think we should, should we scrap the Reserve Bank and let parliamentarians set interest rates?
And so, Helen, just because there's a question from Sean about the fact that already Jason Polinsky last week has said in an op-ed that he doesn't support your integrity bill, and has recently complained about New South Wales ICAC. Is there a way that the local members can change his mind on that, or is there anything they can do?
Yeah, so I would say to people, write to him. You probably already have. Ask for an appointment with him and ask him to go through my bill and tell me the parts that he thinks are problematic. Because the Centre for Public Integrity, the most comprehensive study that's been undertaken of every integrity commission or anti-corruption body around the nation in every state and territory, have looked at them all and said that the bill that I've put forward, the Australian Federal Integrity Commission Bill 2021, because I reintroduced it yesterday, is the best example of a fit-for-purpose integrity commission in Australia. So I've invited Jason, every member of Parliament, to meet with me and talk about the bill, and many have. And many have helped improve that bill, actually. So I would say to you, ask Jason for an appointment and ask him for the bits that he thinks are no good. Because what the Prime Minister tends to do is create this false dichotomy that it's New South Wales ICAC or it's the former Attorney General's completely flawed Commonwealth Integrity Commission, the KIC framework, which is, of course, absolutely not fit for purpose and would in no way solve the problems that we face with integrity in Australia.
Okay, terrific. Thanks. That's great advice. Lizzie and Mark ask, what's the best strategy for bringing about change? How do we trust government again? Maybe I'll ask you, Greg. I mean, given what you tried, is there anything else you might have done differently? I'm putting you on the spot, so maybe Helen and Richard will have some thoughts about that. But you tried to bring about change and it didn't work. Would you have done something differently?
Yeah, great question. Look, it didn't work. It was interesting during the fires to listen to Scott Morrison go. He said, it's ridiculous initially, ridiculous to suggest that climate change caused any of these fires. And it was pointed out to him that nobody had actually said that. Extreme weather driven by climate change was driving the fires, didn't start any. Then he went to, it was a factor, to it was a major factor, to I'll call a Royal Commission. And actually he had a infamous press conference on 4th of January, a catastrophic fire day, where he announced call out of the reserves. He put out a slick Liberal Party advertising video that the chief of the ADF complained about because it showed public assets. It was inappropriate. But, you know, it was how good is the Liberal Party, which was highly inappropriate. I think that people speaking up back, and there was no way that the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister or anybody else could refute what fire chiefs were saying. And then we've had security experts, former Vice Admiral Chris Barry, people like that, Sheldon Durant, the ex-head of Defence, people coming out. All of these voices are making a difference, but what it gets back to, we need more people in Parliament who will vote according to their values rather than what the party tells them to do. And good values, because I've seen some bad values. And now guess which. So, you know, party comes first, truth comes second. Whoever opposes us must be crushed. They're pretty strong values that run in the veins of some politicians who I see on TV a lot. And that was aimed at me and our other fire chiefs for a while. So I actually think that's an incorrect assertion that nothing happened. I think it's shifting. Business is shifting.
Yeah.
The resources industry, banks, superannuation, the money's shifting. And the government's going, oh, okay, we better follow. So, yeah,
so,
I think,
so what you're saying is things do change if we keep putting pressure on, but we won't wait for the government to do it. We've got to do it ourselves. Is that ultimately, though, what needs to be done? I mean, Helen and also Richard, don't we need to actually have this sort of a path forward? We need to have a path that business can follow in order for it to invest and to do the things that need to be done, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Lisa and Greg, I might just add that the Australian Bushfire and Climate Plan that you were an author of, Greg, I was very proud as an independent member of Parliament to create a motion in the House and, in fact, speak to that plan and table it and read it into Hansard. And I think it's an example of the government wasn't listening. That was well over a year ago that I did that. And I had complete freedom to do that and could put that work into the history books, really, of this parliament, which again, I think demonstrates if you have someone who's not aligned to the party message, they can in fact bring the truth into the Hansard in a way that a party person can't possibly do. I think when it comes to any major steps forward in terms of public policy in Australia at the moment, it actually is communities and businesses and state governments who are doing the heavy lifting, not the federal government. And it's just so disappointing, actually. We've had this government now for 8 years, and you'd think that there would be some major achievement that we could point to. That's bringing us into a different future. And well, again, today, as a rural and regional representative, while I had many concerns about what kind of dealing was going on in order to get the government to their net zero by 2050 and take over to Glasgow moment, I didn't see anything that in any way brought rural and regional Australia along in a really positive way. And I was, at the very least, hoping to see that.
So Mark asked, well, we've talked about corruption and normalising by this government of the brazen open corruption brought after war, obvious pork barrelling, blind trust, etc. Although it's not really a blind trust, it's a slush fund, because blind trusts do something different, all in broad daylight. Mark asks, what in your opinion does this do to our society to see our leaders behaving like this? Richard, do you want to have a go at that one?
Oh, sure, I'll have a go. Look, it's terrible. I think it normalises such behaviour. I mean, literally, a leader is someone we can follow. I've got 2 kids, 14 and 11. I expect myself, and everyone expects me to be a role model for my kids. And if I treat people badly in front of them, or if I treat them badly, how do I expect them to grow up? So we all have leadership positions, whether it's in our home, in our community, or for an elected MP, they've sought out a leadership position. They've put up their hand to do a very important job and say, I'd like to represent a community. Now, when you not just become a member of parliament, but wind up Prime Minister, you seem desperate to put yourself out there in a leadership position. There are other jobs for people. Like, why does Scott Morrison want to do this? He is the national leader. He's not the boss. He doesn't get to tell us what to do, but he's put himself in this position of leadership. So when he says, it's okay that people have done these things, I don't need to look any further than that. I brought him into my office. I looked him in the eye. I said, is everything fine? He said, yes. And that was the end of it. So when the Prime Minister literally behaves like that, how do we expect people lower down in federal politics, but more importantly in the business community or in the community at large, to behave? And what are our kids seeing? So, you know, these people don't have to put themselves in leadership positions. They choose to. And through their actions and through their words, they send very powerful signals out there. And just as Donald Trump transformed America, not just its perception itself, but everyone else's perception of it, so too is that happening here in Australia. And when a local member of parliament says, I agree with you, I want a corruption commission, I want to tackle climate change, but I don't actually vote the way I feel, I'm not that kind of guy, I don't take a risk, I don't put you ahead of me, I'm trying to get up the greasy pole and be a minister one day. If the people of Mackellar keep electing people like that, well, you know, what do they expect? So, yes, leadership's very important, and we should have very high expectations of people who put their hand up for leadership positions. We should expect them to lead.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You do wonder. It's like, well, I'm teaching, you know, my son. I certainly will, or my mother even used to say it. If I even said to her, oh, well, such and such did it, and she'd say to me, well, such and such jumped off the harbour bridge with you. And, and yet we seem to have this like, oh, well, they did something worse, so we're not looking so bad.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's in philosophy, that's called moral relativism. And in politics these days, it's called whataboutism. And that is when you accuse someone, when someone's accused of doing something wrong, rather than explain what happened, they say, but what about the time someone else did something even worse? And yeah, when I was growing up, my mum used to say, well, if your sister stuck her head in the oven, is that what you'd do? I'm not quite sure that anyone stuck their head in an oven that I knew growing up, but it did leave a lasting impression on me that moral relativism doesn't win you an argument, except when you're powerful.
Could I jump in, Lisa?
Yeah, please do, Greg.
Just building on what Richard said, I'm really worried about the future because we talk about leadership. I've come through a uniform service where there's rank structures, there's you have objective strategies, tactics, tasks. When you have a major bushfire, for example, or an earthquake rescue in Japan, we've deployed internationally and done things. And I'm used to working with generals, with police commissioners, fire commissioners, who can make big decisions that can affect lots of lives, shift millions of dollars of resources with a click of the finger. And when new information comes to hand, change the plan. I look at the world. We've had a senior public servant say that the drums of war are beating, and referring to China. Our trade, we're sticking to fossil fuels that people aren't going to want to buy in future. So we're not transitioning. We're getting more and more natural disasters. We're one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. Parts of Asia are more disaster-prone, but we're up there. And I don't see leadership. I see people in positions of leadership who work at the task and tactical level with self-interest driving what they do. And I have no faith in this government. I've watched this charade with the Nationals. They've fooled everybody into thinking Paris is about 2050. It's about 2030. And, deep cuts to emissions, but no, we're not going there. So we have a leadership void, and we just need more people like Helen. And thank you, Helen, for raising that in Parliament. We're so grateful for you doing that day. But we need more people like Helen there who will actually vote with their heart and their great community values, rather than what the party tells them to do.
Look, we're coming to the end of our evening, so I thought that I might just ask you each for a sort of closing statement before I introduce Anyo again from Mackellar Rising. Helen, you might have to dash off. I know you've got a 7:30 speech to give, so maybe you'd like to give your closing statement first.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you to Mackellar Rising for your beautiful hospitality tonight. Greg and Richard, it's been a delight to share the panel with you. The fact that you are turning up, everyone, the fact that you are asking questions, you're having conversations with each other, and you're doing it in a respectful way that is about bringing forward solutions, not just criticisms, is very powerful. The democracy belongs to you. Claim it. The seat of Mackellar is yours to give. So you give it to who you want to have it. Good luck.
Thank you, Helen. Richard.
Look, Australia's one of the richest countries in the world. We live at the richest point in world history. We can afford to do anything we want, but we can't afford to do everything we want. When we elect parliamentarians, we're deciding really what problems we want solved. Really everyone that seeks office says, oh, I'll manage the economy and I'll do this, I'll do that. What we're really doing when we're electing people to Parliament is signalling what it is we think is important. And unless people are willing to change their votes, unless people are willing to change their representatives, then they can't expect anything to change. So I think it's exciting talking to groups like yourselves who are clearly interested enough to, set up organisations like this, organise events like this. It's wonderful. Basically with democracy, it's up to us what happens. And, unless people show up and offer an alternative, then nothing can change.
Yeah.
And of course, those in power are always going to tell everyone that nothing can change. Right? They want everyone to believe that it's a safe seat and that your vote doesn't matter. Because if they can make you feel powerless, then you won't rise up against them. But if you want change, You just have to change your vote, and you have to get some friends and family to change your vote. And if you do that, even if you don't win, you will scare your local MP into maybe actually listening to you. So please keep up the pressure. In my experience, the only thing that works in politics is pressure.
Yeah, beautifully. Thank you. Beautifully said. Greg?
Look, it's time to send a message. I don't think that in the major parties, I just don't see the leadership there. If it doesn't work locally, 3 years' time, switch back. But let's send a message to Canberra that this isn't good enough. I'm frightened for the future because of this slow march towards what, the Australia Institute survey, what was it, Richard? 82% of Australians were frightened by the bushfires and think climate was a factor and there needs to be action. And look, we're just dragging our feet. There's so many threats out there on the horizon. We need real leadership and we need respect back in our parliament. I wouldn't ever let my grandkids listen to that. The just sheer rudeness and the disrespect that's shown to people by our Prime Minister, the top person in the country. And they don't rule over us, they work for us. So let's make them work for us. Let's get somebody there who shares our values and concerns about the future.
Beautiful, thank you. So thank you to Helen Haines, to Richard Dennis, to Greg Mullins, of course. And to wrap up this evening, I'm going to say hi to Anyo Geddes, one of the founders of Mackellar Rising, to share the next steps, what we can do.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to say thank you so much, Lisa, again, for being a fabulous host and all the time you put in to make sure that our events are run so professionally and beautifully. We're honoured to have you as part of our team. And thank you to all of our wonderful panellists. What an engaging and exciting discussion it's been tonight. I think it's been really eye-opening for a lot of people. And I think what we come away knowing is that now, more than ever, as everybody has said, it's essential to mobilise your friends, your neighbours and your family to participate in our democracy. Now, more than ever, we need a strong crossbench to support Helen and Zali in passing these bills. We need an authentic, independent voice in Canberra for Mackellar. And the only way to do that is to engage our community. Thank you. I just wanted to say today, thank you to all of the risers who came and joined us for photos this morning in various spots to support Zali's Climate Act bill. Zali's office sent their apologies for the issues that they had with their billboard trailer, but they're very grateful. And just before we started the call, Helen actually told us that when they were sitting in question time today, they were passing around photos of all the people in Mackellar gathered in protest and sharing it on the crossbench. And they were so proud and so grateful to all of us for showing up. Tomorrow, we'll have an opportunity to see if our representative, our MP for Mackellar, backs a roadmap to net zero, Zali's Climate Act, which is very sensible, or if he silences it again. So that'll be the big news tomorrow. I think we all know what's going to happen, but we'll wait till tomorrow to find out. So to end on a positive note, we're so excited to share the Rise Up song. Wonderful, local, incredible performing artists, Sally Seltman and Darren Seltman, have written the most beautiful song for Mackellar Rising. It's called Rise Up Song. It's on our Facebook page. It's on our Instagram page. If you go into our socials, you can download it and listen to it all the time. Share it with your friends. It's the most beautiful, encouraging song, really easy to sing along with. So I encourage you all to subscribe to our website so that you hear about all of our events. Our next event will be an in-person event in November where I'm sure Sally will be performing the song and we really want you all to sing along. And you don't want to miss it. So join the conversation in Facebook, join us on Instagram. If everybody here encouraged 10 of their friends and family to join by the end of the month, we'd have thousands of people in this community movement. And that's what's going to make the change that we need to see. And wear your t-shirt with pride everywhere you go. Now that we're all out there in freedom, we're seeing them everywhere. We're seeing the bumper sticker everywhere. Lisa's got her tote bag hanging on the door there. It's great to see. And so send us a selfie in your t-shirt and please send us a quote and tell us why you are rising for change with us. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you again to Lisa and the panelists and the team for organising tonight's event. We look forward to speaking with you on Facebook and seeing you at our November event in person. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.